I'll get started just by making kind of an introduction, and Maitri asked me to introduce myself a little bit more for folks so that you know who you're talking to. So I've lived in Ananda since 1976. I first came to Ananda in 1974. I've done a lot of different things. Currently, I do construction work still here, and also I have a real interest in seclusion, which you'll see in a little while when I in my introduction to the topic, and meditation is really fun for me. And so I decided several years ago to see if I could specialize in something that I could do, and that was to really try to, maybe not quite beat down the doors of heaven, but maybe sort of partly that, really try to connect with God. And that's what our Sunday service topic is about today. And so let's see, I also am a friend to people. I tend to make friends with individuals, and we talk about the spiritual life. And so I've had a lot of experience with that. And also, we have something called the Bhagavad Gita study group here that's been going for about 8 years. And what we do is we read a section from the Bhagavad Gita and we meditate on it. And then we talk about what this means for our daily lives. And so it's kind of a group exploration of how we apply this stuff. And so we have a grand time doing that. And I see that you've got kind of a Sunday satsang format, which I think is kind of along that same line. And I'm guessing. And so I'm really all for that format. I think it's great. So I encourage you all to ask questions at any point along the line, because this is really your time, and I want to be available for you with your specific needs. And the way I'm going to find that out is by you asking questions or making comments. So anyway, onward to the Sunday service topic. We're talking about the story of Martha and Mary. And it was very interesting to me when I was looking at this that last week we had Martha and Mary too. And last week, Swami was focusing more on learning how to act properly. I think the reading yet last week was Secrets of Right Action or something like that. And the idea was not to be restless in what you're doing, to get into the habit of offering everything that you do into God's hands, into God's consciousness. Well, I remember the story. You probably all remember the story. I think it's in the path. I believe it was Sister Mira, but I'm not sure, who was with Yogananda when he was cooking one day. And you probably all remember the story. Yogananda was cooking and he was messing up one pot or another and everything. And she thought, well, heck, let me be useful. I'll clean these things up as he goes. And so pretty soon she started noticing this guy's a messy cook. And, he's making everything all dirty. And so she finally decided, she kind of threw her hands up mentally and she said, let me just wait until he's done and then I'll clean up. And then she noticed a little smile at the corner of his mouth. And all of a sudden, he wasn't messing things up anymore. And the message she got, I think, was what Swami was talking about, is restless activity just for the sake of being active isn't what God's asking for, isn't going to be helpful to us. And so I also had an experience with this just yesterday, because I have a hard time with this one. So I accept you guys' prayers and help for me on this. I'll tell you one that it might ring some bells for you. Is yesterday I was trying to print something on my printer, and it didn't work. And then it didn't work again. I tried again, and each time I had to go back to the dialog box and punch in the custom things that I wanted, because it forgot, in between times. And I was beginning to think, here I, Sudarshan, am being stopped by this inanimate object from getting the thing done that I wanted to do, and getting more and more steamed over this thing, and which I have a tendency to do. So, but this is the Martha sort of attitude. What I needed to do, I decided, my own version of this is to say, oh, Divine Mother, here we are at the computer again, and you are in the computer. Isn't this wonderful? And thank you for being here in the computer with me. And then the computer, then the printer messes up, and I say, oh, Divine Mother, you want to smear ink all over the paper? Oh, bad. That's not ecological. You're wasting materials. You're wasting ink and wasting paper. And but see, you may not want to chide God, but still, the idea is this guy's talking with God while he's doing this thing. Okay, he's engaging with Divine Mother, with divine consciousness. So that was last week's lesson, and I don't want to belabor that because we got to get on to this week's lesson, which it's interesting that Swami chose the story of Martha and Mary for 2 Sunday services in a row. Okay, and this one focuses more on the Mary part. Okay, Mary was, now we don't know, Swami makes the point that we don't know what the whole story was. We don't know the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would say. We just know a little part of the story, and but perhaps it's enough. And so Mary symbolizes the devotee who, it's not that Mary as a human being is kneeling before Jesus as a human being and being enamored of his presence. Okay, there may have been some part of that, but the main part is that Mary's soul is kneeling before Christ consciousness or infinite consciousness and striving as much as possible to be calm enough to tune in to what Christ consciousness is trying to come to her. Now, this kind of consciousness changes us. Let me put it better. Communion with higher consciousness helps us be transformed. It actually works on us and changes us. Now, I thought about this today, and I realized that all of us have had an experience, or perhaps many experiences, where we felt like we were communing with God. Maybe we were meditating, and we're used to kind of seeing some light at the point between the eyebrows, perhaps, and one day, all of a sudden, just out of the blue, this vision forms in our forehead, and we say, oh my gosh, that's the spiritual eye, and or something like that, and we say, wow. And of course, when we say wow, then of course it disappears. But or we're sitting in meditation, we just have a feeling of peace, just wonderful peace. Or perhaps we're praying for a loved one, or and we have an experience where we feel energy flowing through us to this person, or any number of other really special things that have happened to us. And I suggest that this is a time when we were communing with cosmic consciousness. And so it's sort of like we're reaching out a finger and God's reaching out a finger, like in the, in the Sistine ceiling, Michelangelo's picture, I think, and they come closer and closer together. I'm looking at him here, and and all of a sudden something happens, and wow, we connected with God's consciousness. And of course, notice what happened. I went bzz, and then poing. Okay, it's kind of like you say, oh, the spiritual eye, and then you go, oh, hey, where is it? Oh, I got to calm down again. Okay, that's natural in my experience anyway. And also, we've got to be careful, because a lot of times these wonderful experiences that we have, we cherish them and we remember them, and we find out that if we write in our journals or something like that, and they grow in our journal, and they become more real. Actually, infinite consciousness is infinite, and so and it's timeless, and so it's very possible to go into that experience more. And I would suggest that to you. Write about it in your journal and so forth. But the idea is, I think, is don't stop there. Okay, Don't just say, "Oh, wow, I had a really wonderful experience. I'm going to write it in my journal, and I'll tell maybe selected people about it, and they are often amazed and awed by it." And but it's better to have the two hands reaching together, God's hand in your hand, and touching and holding hands for a while. Okay, communing. Okay, how do we do this? uh, I remember the story of Sri Yukteswar and Yogananda, and they were Sri Yukteswar was speaking, and Yogananda was sitting at his feet, really trying to, just like Mary, trying to completely absorb himself in what Sri Yukteswar was saying. And Sri Yukteswar at one point says, "You are not fully with me." And Yogananda says, "I protest. I am completely with you. I can repeat back to you every word you've said." And Sri Yukteswar said, "Even so, you are not completely with me." And so Yogananda went inside and he tried to tune in, and he realized, yes, in the back of his mind was a vision going. And the vision was, I believe, if I got the story right, of Mount Washington. Now, remember, this is before Yogananda ever got to America. He was seeing a vision of the place where he would found an organization that would touch millions of lives. Okay, maybe change the course of Western civilization, even. Well, for you and me, if you don't mind me saying so, having a vision of something that you're going to do that's going to change the course of self-realization or of Western civilization is probably a pretty good thing. That would be a step up for us. But Yogananda was being trained for a world mission. And so not being completely with Sri Yukteswar was important for him to tune into. It takes absolute absorption, completely being there. Okay. And again, how do we do that? Okay. One thing that Yogananda said was that we all have installed in us a spiritual radio. And I begin to think that it's an extremely complex radio. But the problem is with the spiritual radio is that it's in disrepair. You probably all remember this analogy that he used. It's, you might need the dials maybe have gotten rusty, and you need to put some penetrating oil on them and wiggle them a little bit until they start to move and they get freed up. There may be any number of transistors or resistors or, or whatever electrical components that are blown out and need to be delicately unsoldered from the circuit board and a new one put in. But the circuit board in your computer is pretty small, maybe like this. And I suspect that the circuit board in our spiritual computers probably something like the size of a football field. It's a big thing. It's a very complex thing, and it needs a lot of work to get it dialed in. You've got to do beta testing on different portions of it in order to make sure that it's in, it's working right. And now I say you've got to. Actually, I don't think it's exactly me that does that. I have my part. My part is to do the spiritual practices that Yogananda recommended. Okay. Because he knows, really, I think there's astral technicians that go to work on this stuff. And, I've got a story which some of you have heard, and I don't think I've got time for it today, unless you guys want me to tell it, about Joe and Harry, the Duffer astral electricians who work on my spiritual radio. But anyway, the main thing is that Hongsa, Om, Kriya have the power to create the spiritual ambience in which the spiritual computer, which lives in all of us, can be tuned up and activated. Okay. And it's almost like in my last seclusion, it's almost like I could feel as I was doing Kriya, how Kriya was actually making that transformation happen in real time. Now, it's not something that happens really fast. Um, well, it did happen kind of fast in the seclusion. I guess I could tell you the story is that at one point, at every seclusion, I try to have a really long meditation. And I should also say to everybody, in case you're not familiar with this, I'm a little unusual at Ananda in that I take a 1 month seclusion every year. And I did it this last February, March. And so I have an opportunity to participate in longer rhythms, longer spiritual rhythms than I usually am in a weekend or even a 1 week seclusion. Okay. And so it's a nice thing. It's the favorite thing for me to do in my year. So anyway, I decided to have a really long seclusion. I mean, a really long meditation, do a lot of Kriyas. And I basically spent the day doing this. And so I got done with that particular meditation on a particular day. I did it several times during the meditation, but in that particular, or during the seclusion, but in that particular meditation or that particular day, I had a real long meditation. I did a lot of Kriyas, and I got done and, I was happy, it was good. And, but, I couldn't help being a little disappointed that nothing more sort of happened. It seemed pretty routine. And after all that time, all that hard work, darn it, and okay. So anyway, the next morning, I sat down for meditation again. And it was like Divine Mother was there. She said, "Good morning, Sudarshan. Happy meditation." And I said, "Well, hi, Divine Mother. Happy meditation to you too. Wonderful to see you too." And she says, Sudarshan, I hope you weren't too disappointed yesterday. Everything in its own good time. That was the word she used. Everything in its own good time. Okay. We're in a long-term race here. We're working over long periods of time. In this case, it was only, from one day to the next, but still, it's still perhaps an illustration of the same thing. And so at that point, then I asked her a question, and there was this wonderful kind of waking vision kind of thing that helped me to see the answer to my question. And it was really great. It'd take too long to tell for this time for this satsang, but anyway, it was extremely fulfilling. Now, one thing we got to watch, and Sudarshan is probably a bad example of this, we don't want to look for results. Okay. In other words, Divine Mother, I tell you what, I'll meditate for 12 hours straight as long as you come to me and give me some spiritual goodies. Well, you start doing that, and she's kind of going to go, ew, she's not going to be interested. Okay. So again, work as hard as you can to offer up whatever you do. Once again, just like with the trying to print the thing yesterday, offer it up. Divine Mother's right in this, whether I feel you or not, and everything's fine. I accept, and I'm happy. So anyway, I want to end this up because I want to have a lot of time for us to interact. But okay. So doing lots of Kriya, I think, maybe is one really good way to say it, is it transforms us. It changes us. It changes us because we need to get to that point, just like Yogananda had to get to with Sri Yukteswar, to where his absorption was complete. And if you're anything like me, I know that this brain is fantastically active. Okay. Thoughts are also, remember, thoughts are universally rooted. Okay. Thoughts are infinite. There are an infinite number of thoughts available to us as the children of God. That means that if a zebra who is grazing on the side of a volcano in Africa and is being bitten by a flea and has an itch. That's a thought. And if we tune into it, we can think that thought. I mean, everything. Not to mention some guy on some other planet who's got some itch or has got some, whatever going on. Okay. So there's a really infinite number of thoughts that are available. Actually, having a really buzzy mind might be a sign of good spiritual energy because you're opening up, you're tuning into all these thoughts. Okay. Well, that's self-congratulatory perhaps, but the main thing is if we recognize that, then we learn how to allow them. Master said in one of his poems, he said, "I close the bursting thought-pressed door." And I think that's in prayer at night. Okay. And you just see this door with all these arms and legs sticking out of it and, clamoring, trying to get at him. Well, that's what it feels like. Okay. But you can, but the only way that you can, in my opinion, is by doing Kriya, doing Hongsa, doing Om on a regular basis, building up a big momentum with that. Not so much that it's a big momentum of spiritual energy, but it's a big momentum in the sense that you yourself have been changed. Your consciousness has been changed. It's been calmified, if you want to call it that. It's been pacified. And so it becomes more and more possible to say, oh, I'm meditating now. I think I'd rather not have those thoughts. Okay. And when you see that happening and you see that you said that and it actually happened, you go, holy smokes, it worked. Okay. So anyway, I think that this comes from practice. And so then, and another thing I want to mention too is, let's say that you have a natural instinct towards helping people, perhaps, and perhaps you just imagine being a nurse in a hospital and just giving the light touch of companionship and goodwill and service to people. And you just got this natural desire to do that. You don't know where it came from. Perhaps you were a nurse in previous incarnations or a doctor or something. Okay. In my case, I have a real interest in nature. Marcy Calhoun told me that I'd spent many incarnations as a Native American. Well, and there's a certain area in the West, in Western Nevada, so forth, that I'm very attracted to. And I suspect I probably spent some time there. Okay. Well, having that contact with nature, and particularly the Native Americans had a tradition of going deeply into it, of communing with nature spirits and things like that. And so I find that I have that natural interest. And if it's a wholesome natural interest, God will pick up on that. God knows it already. Divine Mother will pick up on that and come to you through that. Okay. So don't be afraid. I mean, don't just say, well, I like helping people, but I want to meditate first. Okay. Well, keep your meditations up. I mean, the meditations are essential, but don't just hold that other thing off, saying, well, that's a worldly ambition or something like that. If you have this, or let's say you have an interest in art, okay, let that flow and see if God flows through your paintbrush. Okay, give it to God and work with it. It's been wonderful for me to, in these seclusions especially, to commune with nature spirits. And, I can't get all enamored of the fact that the nature spirits are there and I'm talking with them and all this stuff. Okay, you do that, and then all of a sudden you get tangled off into that world. It's the astral world after all. It's not liberation. Okay, but I found that the relaxation and the connection that happens in talking with astral beings, okay, is very similar to what you need in meditation. And so I can say, okay, time to time to meditate, and you've got that experience to where it helps more. So I think that would happen with art. I think that would happen with nursing and any number of other wholesome interests. So maybe that would be another thing to suggest. But anyway, you know, as your spiritual radio becomes more attuned, you might be it will be more often happen that you'll just all of a sudden feel this deep peace coming over you, and you won't want to think. Thoughts will try to come in, and you go, no, just go away, and they will go away, and you're just in peace. Okay. Or it may be that you see the spiritual eye, and you don't just see the spiritual eye, but you see shapes tend to form in it, and the shapes have reference to you. It's talking to you. Remember that all of these different aspects are conscious, okay, and they can talk to you. The Om sound, you may be listening to the Om sound, and it takes form in words, and it'll talk to you and give you advice or give you messages. God will come through all this stuff. God wants to come through. God loves it when we're holding hands like this. I mean, Divine Mother is just so happy when we can do that. She just loves it because she's communing with her beloved children. Okay, that's you and me. And so anyway, I guess maybe another thing that I would do, I always plug seclusion. So I would suggest for everybody, and Mark knows this because we had programs where we were talking about that. But so anyway, I think with this, I'll wind up with these thoughts, and let's have some time to chat about whatever's happening. Did anything that I said ring a bell for anybody, or you want to go deeper into anything, or even something completely off subject is fine too.
Well, thank you, Sudarshan. That was wonderful, and we will open it up now for people's comments and questions, and we'll also come off of Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
So our Facebook friends, if you're wanting to join the conversation, just go to our website, anandatexas.org, and on the Sunday service page, there'll be a link and you can join us. So I'll say goodbye to those folks now and open it up to everyone else. Now that we're off Facebook, please feel free again to open your cameras and ask any questions. I'll ask one question. I want to hear the story about Duffer, the electrician, or whatever.
Well, okay. It'd take about 8 minutes to tell. So, but it's a good illustration, I think. I hope most people have enjoyed it, of this idea that the spiritual radio is being fixed up, and also kind of a neat little communion thing too. So here's the basics. There was a cat at Ananda, and many years ago. This was back in the 80s, I think. And his name was Favorite. He was a big, fluffy, yellow tomcat, orange tomcat. And he'd been around for a long time. Favorite didn't belong to anybody. Favorite was a community cat. And every so often, just sort of by natural selection somehow, somebody decided it was time for them to start buying food for him and, take him to the vet when he needed it and that sort of thing. And Favorite was getting kind of old by now. Okay, so it's good to introduce Favorite. Oh, we're cat people. Savage and are cat people. We didn't have a cat at that time, but we lived at the Iodia cluster where Favorite lived with his most recent human helpmate. And we had an open door policy for Favorite. We just let him in. And so I had gotten up early that morning, and I'd done my morning routine and gone to meditation. And I'd finished my meditation, my healing prayers and everything. And I was walking into our combination living room and kitchen. And I happened to look over at the easy chair, and there was Favorite curled up asleep on the easy chair. And I just, it just was such an affecting thing for me. I just looked over at him, and I was conscious of the fact somebody had taken him to the vet recently, and the vet had said, he might not have that much longer to go. He's getting pretty old. But he was still good enough to get up on a chair and go to sleep. And at this point, I was kind of mourning the fact that he wouldn't be with us much longer. And I just looked at him, and I just, kind of got misty in my heart, and I was just remembering all the times from other places that I'd known him and so forth. So, and then this thought came into my mind, just what I thought was just a stray thought. And it said, "You're adoring that cat." And I was, the macho guy part of me was kind of was bristling a little bit, like, guys don't adore things, but then I stopped myself and I said, no, that's not right. I am adoring that cat, and I'm proud of it. I made that assertion, and so I thought I'd put that one to bed. And, but very quickly, the same voice came into my mind, and it said, "That's what we're doing with you." Oh God, who is this? Who am I hearing from? And, well, I guess it was angels or gurus or something, who were getting through to me and saying, "We're looking at you the same way. We care about you very, very, very much." And, in that kind of, this was another one of those kind of experiences that, I was talking about where, the two fingers come together. Something was going on. And then at that point, I began to have sort of a waking vision. And it was kind of like a replay of what happened that morning. And so I watched Sudarshan as he got done with his morning routine, and, walked into the meditation room and got out the meditation bench and sat down. And he said his beginning prayer, and then he started to do Hong Sa. He determined, okay, Hong Sa comes next, and so he was starting to do Hong Sa. And for one Hong Sa, one Hong and one Sa, it was just Hong Sa, nothing else. Nothing else was going on. And then outside, because there's a road fairly close to IOD Cluster, an old pickup truck went driving by, and it was rattling and clattering, and Sudarshan's ears heard this, and Sudarshan started thinking, "That's a pickup truck." And he said, "Yeah, it looks kind of an old one, I bet, by the sound of it." "Yeah, Uncle Harry had a pickup truck like that." "Yeah, and he used to carry around his big old dog in the back." "Yeah, and then we used to go fishing. He'd load his kids in the back. They won't let you put kids in the back of the pickup anymore." But, and then all of a sudden, boing, "Hey, wait a minute, I'm doing Hong Sa." Okay. Okay, so you follow Sudarshan through a few cycles of that. He gets back into Hong Sa for a while, but then all of a sudden something else happens. He starts wool gathering again. Okay. But I saw something else. And above Sudarshan's head were hovering Joe and Harry. Now, they didn't have actual names, but I decided to call them Joe and Harry. And these guys were old guys. They were duffers. They were guys who knew how to, they were like electricians. They were radio technicians, okay? And they had a bunch of tools in their hands, like testers and, soldering irons and adjustment devices, And their job was to tune up Sudarshan's radio, but they could only do it when he was concentrating. So when he was on Hong Sa, they could get in and work. Okay. So anyway, I watched him, and Sudarshan got refocused after the pickup truck, and all of a sudden he was focused, and they said, "Get in there." So there they get in and they start working, and then pretty soon Sudarshan gets distracted again, and whoop, out they pop, and And Joe says to Harry, did you make a connection? I got two. And they're really happy, like they made a couple more connections in Sudarshan spiritual radio. And now the thing is that Sudarshan spiritual radio is huge. Okay. And they've got a lot of work to do, but Joe and Harry never get discouraged. They're divine beings. They're very happy. They're always happy. Okay. And they're really glad to do whatever they can. And so after 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years of watching very carefully, getting in there when they can, they start to make measurable progress. And the radio, Sudarshan spiritual radio, is so complex and has so many compartments in it, so to speak, that, as electronic technicians, they understand that they can get a section of it working okay, and they might push a button occasionally and beta test it, see if it runs, see if it's running. So, Sudarshan's sitting there meditating, and he sees this kind of light between the eyebrows, and goes, oh yeah, I see that every so often. Then it starts getting a little stronger, and he starts noticing there's some form to it, and it's kind of got a dark center, and then all of a sudden he's, holy smokes, that's a spiritual eye, like I said before. And then, of course, what happens is gone. Well, he may have overloaded the beta test that was going on. Okay. And, and Joe and Harry said, shoot, we blew a fuse, and okay. I mean, all of this, is kind of fanciful in a way, but it was an illustration, which I think the basis of it was true. It was a humorous way for God to show me something that was going on and say, hey, look, you think when you sit down to meditate that nothing's happening. Okay. You close your eyes and all you see is dark. Okay. And you do that for years. And the only reason you're doing it is because Yogananda said it was a good idea. Okay. But you start to get discouraged. But look, Joe and Harry are at work, and you got to give them time to get their work done. Okay. They've been at work all this time. Okay, so anyway, it's a humorous way of looking at what's going on. Joe and Harry, or we, or God, actually has a real big job to do about us. We are divine beings. We are divine beings. And we got to get used to that idea and work with it. One of the things that I've often thought recently is that in order to be an effective devotee, you need to have a healthy relationship with infinity. Because God is infinite. And I know I've had some conversations with Divine Mother before, and I said, okay, look, Divine Mother, you can figure this out. You're infinite. You're omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent. So look, you've got an unsurmountable advantage over me. And so what do you have to say about that? And Divine Mother doesn't say, oh, well, Sudarshan, you're, just keep trying and you'll get there eventually. She doesn't say that at all. What she says is, oh, Sudarshan, it's not that hard. Just keep on working on it. You're going to get there real quick. I go, uh-oh. And that puts the ball back in my court. Mm-hmm. Part of the trick with that is, by the way, is that because you and Divine Mother really are one being, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to develop omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence. It's already there. I think that's what she means is, hey, it's not that hard. Okay. Work on the connection. The more you hold hands like that, the more the connection happens to where you start to think, oh, Sudarshan isn't me. Sudarshan is a construct of Divine Mother, who is me. Okay. And I got to tell you, I've wrestled with this a lot, but I think that's what's happening is that I call seclusion adventures in consciousness. And so and I think it's a good term, is that adventure. You have adventures in consciousness. You get little hints, and follow them up, and see where that hint leads. And you meet somebody partway along the way, and they say, "Well, I'm glad you followed that up. I didn't know whether you'd pick that one up or not." Well, but since you did, come along. I'll show you something. Okay, and so that's adventures in consciousness. So anyway, I better shut up and see if anybody's got something else.
Well, that was wonderful, Sudarshan. I love that story. And I love that phrase, adventures in consciousness. If I had a pencil near me, I'd be writing it down, but I know Mike has got to be writing it down. So I'll ask him later because he's really good about that. But let's see if anybody else has some comments or a question for Sudarshan. We've got a little bit more time here. Or wants to just say hi.
I know Mike's. Oh, okay, Eric.
Oh, you can go ahead, Mike, if you got something.
I was poking him up.
It's funny that you had mentioned that about the journaling, the writing down of certain things, and that it grows from that. And I just had an experience of that. Way back when there was something I used to do called intensive journaling, which covers a lot of different areas, and you reread certain things and something grows out of it. I had a recent time when I was at a spiritual retreat, and I just had so many rich experiences, and I wrote them down and I reviewed them last night. And in the middle of the night, I had I don't want to even call it a dream. I was on the phone with Divine Mother. I could feel that presence, and there was just silence, though. It was just the presence, and I could hear some other voices, but it was like being let in on a family conversation. I felt family, I felt part of the family. It was remarkable. So the writing down and the reviewing of, sometimes when I go and I do something like I do an Ananda retreat and I don't write anything down, it becomes one thing. It's one kind of nebulous thing. There could be a really lovely feeling with it. But when I review all the little pieces, this conversation with this person, this feeling when I was in this situation, and then I read them all together, it does bring something alive. Yeah. Does that make sense? I know that you obviously are somebody who does that.
Yeah, I sometimes in my seclusions write 100 pages worth of handwritten journal. I've done it with my computer too, but mostly it's handwritten. But that's a lot. And I found that when I have an experience like that, which is, I guess, what you'd call a superconscious experience, that as I think, I've got to write this down. I've got to get this, recorded somehow. And so I start recording it. And then I realize as I'm recording it, I think like you're saying, it expands out it further. Okay. And then I get all these other inspirations. And then I write those down. And then that leads to another inspiration. And then I write that down. And pretty soon I've got this pretty fantastic journey through consciousness. Excuse me. And somehow I think I realized, at least this is how I understood it, as far as I did, is that cosmic consciousness is conscious, and it's eternal, and it's timeless. And so that experience is just as alive now when I'm sitting down writing and journaling about it as it was when it was happening. Because we tend to think in terms of time. So we say it happened, yesterday, and I'm writing it down now at 8 a.m. today. But in actuality, all we're doing is re-entering that experience and that consciousness. And so therefore, another benefit of that is that, one, by writing it down, you allow it to expand further into its full, or at least a fuller expression. But also now you can go back and read your journal and it'll bring you right back into it again. So I'm a big fan of journaling, like you are, and I really encourage you to keep that up, and and it's inspiring to hear you talk about it. That sounds wonderful.
Anybody else have some comments they'd like to make? Mallory, we see you there.
Yeah, I have a question. Thank you for your talk.
Yes.
Very inspiring.
Good.
I think it was when you were talking about connecting with nature,
Mm-hmm.
and then you said, but you can get all tangled up in the ether.
Oh, yeah.
And I wanted to know what that meant.
Oh, okay. Well, what I was, sort of making a shorthand reference there. It's common for people, and I know many people who have done this to some degree or other, is they have contact with a nature spirit, for instance, and they think, it's like when you touch fingers together and and then all of a sudden, whang, whang, you go away. They're just so they're so excited about that. It's kind of real, and it's great. And then they start reading books about nature spirits, and they think, well, what I got to do is I got to do this more. And then pretty soon they contact more nature spirits, and then they get all excited about that, and they start giving lectures about it, and they start getting all involved in that aspect of it. Okay. And I'm not saying that's bad. I mean, that's probably very good, and it's a good way of getting involved in, after all, here we are. Sri Yukteswar said that the astral world is like the balloon above the basket of the physical world, like with a hot air balloon. I mean, the astral world is huge. And here we go along, in our daily lives, and we totally ignore it, And I found a little bit that the nature spirits kind of go, when I've tried to connect, and I've had real reasons, and this is a story that would take probably an hour to tell, but I had problems with mice in my trailer, in my seclusion trailer, because it's a 1951, and so it has seen better days, and so the mice can get in, and so I had to deal with the mice, and I went through a whole long adventure figuring out how to deal with the mice, which was successful, by the way. And it had to do with connecting with the nature spirits involved, ultimately. And but there was a whole progression that went on with that. But so then you can get enamored of this stuff, okay? And then all of a sudden, somebody asks you, well, aren't you a devotee of Yogananda? Oh, yeah, I am, yeah. And how's your Kriyas going? Well, I think that kind of, I got so involved in this nature stuff, I just couldn't keep going with it, Okay. And so that's what I'm talking about the danger of getting, I mean, the astral world is infinite, or, effectively infinite. And there's easily enough stuff there to get totally absorbed in for 85 incarnations, or perhaps 850, or perhaps so many that will boggle your mind. And so you want to stick with your spiritual path. So that's what I was talking about getting too involved.
You're not grounded as you need to be.
Yeah, sort of not grounded. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But what I was saying was in a proper dose, it's great, because it's something that you're interested in. And so you move into that as a part of your connection. When I say a prayer, when I begin my seclusions, I pray to all the masters, but then I start praying also to everyone who's ever walked here, even all the Native Americans 10,000 years ago, the mastodons that used to walk here, the pine trees and the Kitkadizzy and and all the other spirits. And I say, would you please bless my seclusion, because I'm seeking God here. Okay. And they get into it, and the nature spirits also, when you really try, you burrow in and you really try to connect with them, I get this feeling that they're going, that's a human. There's a human calling to us. They never talk to us. What's going on? And you think this guy's on the level? And so that, and then after a while they go, well, holy smokes, I said, well, why not? We'll talk to him. Okay. And so there's also that, I mean, I don't want to call that a barrier, but it's a little bit, there's that thing where, uh, it's not a customary thing, and probably good, I guess, at least in Dwapara Yuga. In early Dwapara Yuga, it's probably okay. I suspect as the ages progress, then we'll be interacting and working hand in hand with nature spirits on a regular basis, on a routine basis. I suspect that'll be happening. But for right now, it's rare. So,
Thank you.
sure.
Yeah, so it's sort of like being able to not get so distracted by this, exploration or this connection,
Yeah.
bringing God into it and integrating it into,
Yeah.
rather than letting it sort of take you off.
Well, yeah, because it's easy to become enamored with these things. It's like falling in love. You fall in love and just can't think of anything else except your sweetie. And so that can happen too. But I think just having Divine Mother in your heart and feeling that Master is your guru, and always referring everything back to them and saying, hey, is this a good step to take? What do you think? Sometimes they'll come back to you and they say, well, what do you think? And they put you on the spot.
Really, really good point, because, in general, just talking about what are, the sort of phenomenal distractions of our meditations and our connection to, like you said, the bigger world, how you want to deal with that, and the appropriate way to deal with that, because it can, be sort of a karmic side trip,
Well,
and
it could be.
down that way again, after you've been doing it for so long, again, past lives, you really want God. And so, like you said, like bringing really God into it, like in a conscious way, because I think that is not an uncommon thing that happens to the devotee.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. And, there's been any number of people who come to Ananda, for instance, as a true spiritual work. Ananda is a true spiritual work. There are many others too. There's a few that are not as clear. They're kind of muddy, but anyway, we've seen people come and they get enamored of one thing or the other. Swami used to talk about musicians. I know we're about 2 minutes before time to end, but he'd talk about a musician and or a devotee who finds that he has a great talent for music. And he says, well, for one person, it might be very good for him to follow that up, okay, and become a great concert pianist, for instance, okay, really great, okay. For another person, it might be a distraction, and it's really hard to know which is which. And again, I don't want to put down anybody who gets in contact with the nature spirits, for instance, and then moves on to give lectures on it and explore it further. That may be karmically what he or she needs to do. And I don't know, I don't really know. But I know that Swami used to caution us very often about not getting distracted. And, once you found your spiritual path, stick with it. And also always connect with your guide, Yogananda. Pray to Swami if you want, and say, hey, what do you think? I'm not going to do this unless you say okay. Okay. And, really, and, bug them. Don't let them get off with, silence. These are your family, like Eric was saying. This is a family party line here. And if mom won't talk to you, you got to do something to get mom to talk to you. It may be mom has a reason not to talk to you, and you got to work through that too, but you still got to get with her, because you don't want to make any decisions without without having her consent or master's consent, you know. So anyway, I guess we kind of used up the time, but
Well, thank you very much, Sudarshan. It's been wonderful listening and all the great questions and everything. And you had already answered my question that I had, which was about Divine Mother and being infinite. Thank you.
okay.
So one quick question before you go, Sudarshan. I've been doing some follow-up sessions with some of our Learn to Meditate students, doing it virtually. And one of the things I do in that is just try to share some things that are very inspiring with them, about keep going, even though it feels like nothing is happening. And I'm wondering if it's okay if I share your story about your spiritual radio technicians, our new Hong Sa students. And what I would probably do, because you tell it so well, is I'd probably just take the video clip, because we're recording, take the video clip of you telling the story and play that for them, and then and then we can use that as a spring discussion. So just wanted to get your blessing on that, if that's okay with you.
Sure, that's fine. And I know, many people have enjoyed that story, and I'm sure people repeat it to each other. And so I asked Divine Mother if it was okay to share that, and she seemed to be okay with it. So anyway, yeah, go ahead. And doing it with the video is a good idea. So
Yeah, I think, because you tell it very well.
Well, you are an amazing storyteller. You have just such a natural talent for that, and it's also enjoyable and folksy and relatable. And it's been a real joy to have you join us again.
Yeah.
And it's very inspiring. And the whole, even though this time you didn't talk so much about seclusion, you talked a little bit about it. I think we all got that message again. It's just, seclusion is just, that's the way we can really break the, being mesmerized by the world, if we just take that time to go deep. And Divine Mother's just right there waiting to our hearts and to bring us deeper. So thank you again for re-emphasizing that and re-inspiring us in that way too. So,
well, one thing I can mention just really quickly about that is that God has a matching grant program. So if you say, listen, God, I want to, I think I can get 3 days out, a long weekend, and I think I can do this, but I've got to get back by Tuesday because there's something at work that, they really need me at, but I can do it between now and then. And God says, okay. And then all of a sudden you find out that meeting got postponed till the next week. Okay. God went to work on it, and did the matching grant program. And now you've got a whole week. So don't screw up and say, oh, good, now I can catch up on my income tax, Okay. Take that, because Divine Mother did that for you. So take your week, or whatever. But anyway, I just wanted to let you know that that I found that often, is that God fixes things up. But you've got to make the move, but then God supports you. So, and I know it's really hard to, a lot of people tell me, I just can't find time for it. But I found out that if I once decide to do it, then God makes time for it. So.
Well, and then you get more a desire for it too. The more you get the desire for it. And I know, I'll just say this, I know for myself, one of my obstacles to it is that I always feel like I have to seclude. If I'm going to seclude, it's got to be at Ananda village or at Ananda place, and that's an obstacle when you live in Texas, because it takes.
Well, that's a good thing, because you're tuning into the power of pilgrimage.
Yeah.
But sometimes you got to do what you got to do, and you go find this really cool Cistercian monastery that you never knew was just up the road, and you talk with the prior. And he says, yeah, sure, we don't get that request very often, but we've got an extra cell. We could fix you up, or whatever.
Yeah, I know. It's something to not let be an obstacle for sure, but it's one of mine. It's like, okay, well, when I get back there, I'll do it again. But anyway, So, well, any last words comments from anybody? Otherwise, we'll be wrapping this up. We're actually in a hotel room here, Sudarshan, and we got to be out by 12:30. So,
Okay.
so, but anybody else? Any final comments? Otherwise, we'll end with our Texas goodbye. No? Okay. Well, thank you again. Our love to you and Savitri and
He's right over here.
oh, good.
He's hearing you.
Oh, good. We so appreciate you coming on, and we hope to see you both again, either in person when we come individually, or maybe we can have you back online in the future. So thank you so much. And so
Okay.
we'll end with our traditional Texas goodbye, which is Namaste, y'all.
Namaste, y'all.
Blessings. Everybody have a great Mother's Day.